Do you ever have one of those moments where you could be doing anything? You could be walking down the street, you could be taking a bite to eat, you could be watching something on television, and all of the sudden, the nostalgia hits you. It floods in. You have this feeling and this remembering of a moment in time or a past life, even. And it just hits you like a ton of bricks. And you just kind of want to stay there for a moment. You kind of want to appreciate that for a moment. That's actually something that I've been dealing with for the last 2 weeks now. It was unexpected. I didn't really know what to think, but I'm finding some enjoyment about it. Let's get started. Hi, hello, and welcome in to the Ball Don't Lie podcast, episode number 126. And when I started this podcast a couple of years ago, if you would have told me that I would be starting a podcast episode talking about what I'm about to talk about, I would have told you you were crazy. For the last 2 weeks, I have gotten so much enjoyment out of watching NASCAR. Yes, NASCAR. It, of course, starts with the Great American Race, the Daytona 500, which, NASCAR is crazy. They race like February through October. They get December off. January, they're testing. February, they're right back in the race schedule with the Daytona 500. It's a ridiculous schedule. Like soccer is like that. NASCAR, it's nuts. But a flip on the Daytona 500. Obviously, no more football on Sundays. We haven't reached baseball levels yet. And I couldn't take my eyes off of it. Couldn't take my eyes off of NASCAR. Like, where is this coming from? When I was a kid, my dad loved NASCAR. My uncles loved NASCAR. They used to go to the Daytona 500. I went to a race with them one time. I've been to like Lowe's Motor Speedway, Darlington. I was on the track at Darlington. I think we went by I think we went by another one too. I can't remember. I've been to Hendrick Motorsports. I've been to DEI, which is not the DEI you people are talking about these days. Dale Earnhardt Incorporated is what I'm talking about. I've been to all these different places. And I remember it being really, really cool. And there was a time I had NASCAR, the diecast cars all over the place. I had a Kyle Busch jacket, I think, at one point. NASCAR used to be a big part of my life. And I guess I shouldn't say a big part of my life, but it was a big part of the sports scene. It was something my dad and my uncles all really liked. And so we would watch it often on Sundays. And I haven't really paid that much attention to it. I know a little bit about it. I have some coworkers that love NASCAR. But for some reason, watching the Daytona 500 this year, I was enamored by it. I could not take my eyes off of the screen. And so the race happens and William Byron wins. I have a NASCAR hot take I'd like to share. And if you're a NASCAR person out there, tell me what you think about this. I wasn't planning on talking about this. Here we go. When somebody has a car number and a design with that number, and they're really, really good, they're an all-time great, that number and that car and that design should then be retired. You shouldn't allow other people to do it. Like, for years, nobody raced the number 3, the black Dale Earnhardt, obviously, and nobody should do it. I think Austin Dillon maybe does it now, but William Byron has won back-to-back Daytona 500s, and he does so in the 24 Chevrolet. I don't even know what the sponsor is, but it's the same basically design as Jeff Gordon, and I think that's hogwash. Jeff Gordon, I was raised to dislike Jeff Gordon, but Jeff Gordon is one of the all-time greats. Nobody should be using his style and scheme of the number 24 ever again. Just like nobody should drive the number 48 Lowe's ever again in that scheme and that's it. Someone explain this to me. It doesn't make sense to me. I think there should be some respect for some of the great drivers of all time, and they shouldn't be doing that anymore. That's what I think. Anyways, I was so excited about NASCAR. I watched it again on Sunday at Atlanta Motor Speedway and enjoyed the heck out of it. I don't know if this is going to continue once baseball starts, but I'm just enjoying watching NASCAR. When they crank it up, you turn that volume all the way up, man, That's a good feeling. And I think mainly it just transports me back to when I was a little kid and I used to watch NASCAR all the time. All right. Anything else going on? Anything else pertinent? I have a recommendation for you. If you have Netflix, and I think everybody on the planet does at this point, if you don't, I don't know what's going on, but there's a new documentary series out. It's called Court of Gold. It is about the Olympic men's basketball tournament from this past summer in Paris. It follows the United States, Canada, Serbia, and France. France, of course, being the home country, the host country. And it's a behind the scenes style, kind of like The Last Dance, a little bit like the quarterback or wide receiver. It's definitely, you can tell the fingerprints of Netflix sports are on this documentary, and it is fascinating stuff. Like truly fascinating stuff. I think I'm 4 episodes in. I think there's 6 total. It's just fantastic. And there is a scene in particular with Kevin Durant talking about how much the game of basketball means to him and playing on that stage and how much that means to him to see people who have traveled and have all these different life stories. And Kevin becomes overcome with emotion. This is a silent killer, the Slim Reaper, they call him, Kevin Durant. And he's overcome with emotion about how much basketball means to him. Really, really riveting stuff, powerful stuff. I mean, they get all sorts of people to sit down for this. Barack Obama did a sit down interview for this documentary. It's really, really cool. Really cool. Cannot recommend it enough. It's called Court of Gold on Netflix. And something entirely non-sports related in terms of recommendations. So this is the time of year when I watch TV. When I like start shows, when I try to disconnect a little bit from sports because I have like at the beginning of the year like a 2 month downtime after football ends, before baseball starts, to where I have to be a little bit more locked in. So it's just kind of an easier, more chill part of my year. And that's when I try to like watch TV shows, kind of disconnect from sports a little bit because sports are my life, and I do that every day. And sometimes, as ridiculous as it sounds, and my imposter syndrome loves to hear this, um, it's not easy to um to work in sports all the time and have to pay attention to sports all the time and have a take about sports all the time. So I want to find other things to do, much like I'm sure you do outside of your work. You don't want to think about your job all the time. So that being said, here I am going out of my way to make a sports podcast. That doesn't really make sense, does it? Anyways, um, there's a show, discovered it yesterday on Netflix. It's called Zero Day, and short limited series starring Robert De Niro. Is it Robert De Niro? I don't know. One of those old guys that's been around for a while. He's a former president, and there is a cyber attack on the United States. They call it Zero Day. Go to Netflix, look up the trailer, and I think it basically speaks for itself. I watched 1 episode last night. I haven't been able to stop thinking about it. I am completely hooked. I can't wait to watch more again. All right. Should we talk about football? The NFL scouting combine is getting underway this week in Indianapolis, Indiana, because as we all know, there is no off season. There really truly is no off season because they're going to do this for a week, and then they're going to do like some pro days and stuff, and then bam, free agency is going to start, and there's going to be more pro days and private workouts, and then in April, I think early April, you'll be able to do some OTAs with teams that have new coaches and stuff like that. And then bang, here comes the draft. And then bang, here comes the schedule release. We're in OTAs in the month of June. Training camp starts in July. Preseason starts in August. Season starts in September. There is no off season. It's the best sport in the world, and I love it so much. Anyways, and most of the experts would tell you that there's a couple of really deep positions in this draft: offensive line, defensive line, tight end. There's a couple of not so deep positions, maybe running back, quarterback, wide receiver, not exactly what we're used to seeing. And I wonder how college sports and the portal and all that's going to have an impact on the NFL moving forward. But it's also coupled with the fact that it's not the greatest free agent class of all times. But what's interesting is the needy part of the free agent class kind of aligns with the deep part of the draft and vice versa. So there is an opportunity for teams to get better. And then the big news happening that the salary cap is going to go up a significant amount. That's going to be really beneficial to teams like the Cincinnati Bengals. And I think that's one of the more confusing parts of this whole offseason when it comes to the Bengals. And admittedly, I probably haven't done a good enough job explaining to you, the listener, exactly what we're going through when it comes to that. Now, the Bengals have already made a couple of moves. They moved on from Sheldon Rankins. They cut him, and in doing so, freed up $9.5 million in cap space, which gives them a lot more flexibility. Here's the thing about Rankins. Last year, the Bengals had a need at defensive tackle. They were moving on from Sheldon Rankins. They were moving on from DJ Reader. They did not get a lot of production from that position. They needed somebody in the defensive interior that can create pass rush. Sheldon Rankins was the best available guy on the market, and they went out and got him, and the Bengals deserve credit for that. The season never really got off the ground for Rankins. I was told by people close to the organization that Rankins kind of mailed it in. He was just a guy, didn't really have a lot of desire, didn't really seem like somebody who was fully committed to being a professional football player. That is a major, major mishap by the Bengals. How do you allow that to happen? I don't know. Then later on in the season, after 7 games, right before a game in Los Angeles against the Chargers on Sunday Night Football, Rankins comes down with an illness, and nobody really knows what it is. He never played another snap. We just found out this week that he was dealing with viral meningitis, which is some scary, scary stuff for Sheldon Rankins. That can screw up your whole life. So hopefully he gets better. Maybe he'll get another shot in the NFL. I don't know. But the Bengals, it was an easy, easy move to move on from him. Another domino that's fallen is that Jermaine Pratt is asking for a trade. Now, you might see this and think, oh, okay, well, of course, Bengals aren't going to pay their stars and blah. That's the national narrative. And we've talked plenty about the national narrative on this show. But quite frankly, Jermaine Pratt is the most inconsistent football player I've ever seen play football. Seriously, truly. I've been watching this game for almost 30 years now. I've been understanding it for quite a while, and I've never seen a player like Jermaine Pratt. One snap, he looks like Ray Lewis and Dick Butkus. The next snap, he looks like Nick Vigil. I cannot figure out who he is as a player. And yet, repeatedly, over the course of his career in Cincinnati, he came up with the big play. He'd bat the ball down. He stripped Travis Kelce in that big game. He had multiple huge interceptions, including one earlier this year against Denver. And of course, the interception that sealed the playoff win in 2021 against the Las Vegas Raiders. The maybe most famous play in Bengals history to this point. I don't know. But Jermaine Pratt always had a way of making the big play. And I appreciated that. I miss that. I will miss that about Jermaine Pratt. But here's the thing. He's getting older. He's wildly inconsistent on a snap-to-snap basis. His missed tackles this year were a major liability for this defense. And I don't know that he's the best locker room leader, all said and done. That's just my guess. I don't know Jermaine. I don't know that to be a fact. I'm just – the way I see it, doesn't look like somebody that they're going to miss that much when he leaves. So he's on a deal that pays him $5.6 million. The Bengals are probably looking at that saying, listen, man, here's the deal. We've got a lot of financial stuff we've got to get done this year. You didn't play up to that $5.6 million number. So we'd like to renegotiate your contract, give you a pay cut, and keep you around. And Jermaine probably said, hell no, I don't want to do that. I think I'm worth $5.5 million. And the Bengals said, okay, well, you guys can go look for a trade. And if you can find a suitor, we'll trade you. You can make your $5.5 million and we'll get something out of it. So that's what's happening. The same thing happened essentially with Joe Mixon last year. The Bengals decided that they were going to move on from Joe. They tried to do right by him. They were able to get a 7th-round pick out of him from the Houston Texans. Joe had a solid season. The Bengals didn't miss him or his offensive production whatsoever. Could they have missed him a little bit in the locker room? Maybe. I think that's a valid point. But they did what they had to do. They did right by Joe. And at the end of the day, everybody was happy. I don't know that that's going to happen with Jermaine Pratt. When you look at Joe Mixon on tape, you can see some stuff there. Like, okay, we can work with this. And in Houston, in their offense and their style, it just made more sense for Joe Mixon. I don't know that you're going to find that with Jermaine Pratt. Truthfully, I can't emphasize this enough. I've never seen a more inconsistent player in the history of football. Truthfully, and so because of that, I don't know that anybody's going to pay him $5.5 million, especially with the way the free agent class lines up, with the linebackers coming out of college. I just don't know if it's going to happen. So it's either back to square one, which is Jermaine is unhappy, doesn't want to take the pay cut, and the Bengals cut him. Then all of a sudden, boom, another hole has opened up on your already porous defense. Or Jermaine says, all right, you're right. Let's cut this, whatever. I'll come back, try to earn my way back, whatever. I don't know that that's going to happen. Right now, I would expect maybe they trade him for a 7th-round pick, and maybe they'll eat a little bit of that salary to make it work. I don't know. Or they just cut him and have to look for another starter on defense with Al Golden. So that's the story on Jermaine Pratt. There's a couple of other guys that are interesting candidates when it comes to cutting them. The most notable being Sam Hubbard. Sam would again free up $8-9 million worth of cap space. And Sam, unfortunately, his body has betrayed him over the last couple of years. People forget Sam was actually drafted during the Marvin Lewis era. That's how long Sam Hubbard's been in the National Football League. He's been solid, been productive, but the last couple of years, his pass rush has deteriorated. His body has failed him. It just hasn't been a great player. And at times, I think because of his role in the locker room, because of his importance to the city of Cincinnati, and because I think of probably just a fondness by Lou Anarumo and Zach Taylor, Sam Hubbard played too much. Quite frankly, he hurt the team last year in a lot of snaps where he should have been off the field. And when Sam got hurt late in the year and you saw more of Joseph Ossai and more of Myles Murphy, you saw more production out of those defensive end spots. Hell, Joseph Ossai ended up with a pretty strong season sack-wise. That's a guy who is going into a contract year this year that I think the Bengals are going to – I think it would be wise for them to bring back. That's one of those cap cut type of guys that just makes sense. Maybe they bring him back on a veteran minimum. Maybe he retires. I don't know. But Sam Hubbard will not be in Cincinnati under that current contract. It just makes no sense for either side right now. So I think they'll probably try to bring him back at a veteran minimum and a much different and reduced role on Al Golden's defense. Another one that's interesting is Geno Stone. Stone was a guy they signed, led the AFC in interceptions in 2023, comes from Baltimore, and just has a stinker of a year for the Bengals. Is not great, can't tackle, terrible pursuit, effort looked like it was an issue. And come to find out, the way he was being used in the Lou Anarumo defense just didn't quite match up with the best part of his skill set. And as that defense was tinkered with and tweaked over the course of the season, we saw a little bit more of what Geno Stone is supposed to look like. With the holes that are going to be created by moving on from a Sam Hubbard, potentially losing a Joseph Ossai, the Trey Hendrickson question mark, and as we just mentioned, Jermaine Pratt probably not going to be here. I don't know that the Bengals will want to cause another hole to open up on that defense looking for a starter by cutting Geno Stone. And I think at one point this season, most people thought this is a foregone conclusion. They're going to cut Geno Stone. They're going to move on from him. He's been terrible. He turned his play around in the second half of the season. His style fits a little bit more of what Al Golden wants to do on the defensive side of the ball. So right now, I would think that Geno Stone actually sticks around. Let's go to the offensive side of the ball. The guard position. The two worst guards in all of football last year were Alex Kappa and Cordell Volson. Alex Kappa's been around a while. He's a veteran. He's never been this elite guard, but he's never been as bad as he was this past season. A truly awful season for Alex Kappa. Cordell Volson at one point got benched, former draft pick of this team. Cody Ford played a little bit. Duke Tobin said at the Combine in Alabama, or the Senior Bowl in Alabama, that they will add to that room without question. My question is, do they subtract from that room? Do they move on from Kappa and Volson and try to clear out a little bit more cap space again as they try to do the roster gymnastics of signing all these other guys, the T. Higgins and Trey Hendrickson and Jamar Chases of the world? That's a really, really interesting decision. The offensive line, and primarily the interior of the offensive line, is one of those positions in the draft where it actually makes sense. And there's some depth there that the Bengals could get a guy who could come in and start at pick number 17 in the draft. They could get one in the second or third round, perhaps, as well. So there's some flexibility there for the Bengals as far as that's concerned. And it might be one where they hold on to Alex Kappa as long as they can, see how the draft plays out, and then go from there. Right now, I don't think he's going to get cut. And so some people are probably, freaking out hearing that. But at the moment, I would say they keep Alex Kappa and address the rest of the offensive line, that other left guard spot where Cordell Volson and Cody Ford played a little bit. And I do expect them to make a run at Cody Ford and bring Cody back just because they like his versatility. He's played solid for them. He's been a good teammate, good locker room guy. And I would expect them to try to make a run at bringing Cody Ford back. Here's the thing that I think I haven't done a good enough job explaining on this podcast. And part of it is because I needed a little bit of a better understanding of it myself. When it comes to trying to sign all these free agents, the big thing is cash over cap. The salary cap is going to go up over $277 million. It's going to go up now 50 plus, 55 plus $million over the last 2 years. That means that business in the National Football League is booming. That means that the league is doing great. There's money coming in all different ways. They've expanded the international series. TV rights are doing well. Merchandise, tickets, all of it. Everything the NFL is doing, they're doing a really good job at. They're making a ton of money, and they should be applauded for that. When it comes to roster building, though, the Bengals are behind the times, and there are ways to manipulate that salary cap. If you don't know what a salary cap is, it's the most money a team can spend on their roster. Baseball, for example, doesn't have one. So the Dodgers can spend $1 billion on acquiring players and nothing happens because there's no rule or an amount that they can go up to. The NFL, there is. You can't spend more than a certain amount. There's also a salary floor where you have to spend at least a certain amount of the salary cap. The league wants every team to be competitive. That's why they schedule the games the way they do. That's why the salary cap exists. That's why the roster rules exist. It's all because every team is supposed to be competitive. There's supposed to be belief in every NFL market that my team can be good, that my team can win the Super Bowl. That's what the NFL wants. So anyways, some teams are much better at this than others when it comes to figuring out how to manipulate the cap. You can give guys signing bonuses, roster bonuses, workout bonuses in ways that don't work against the cap. Signing bonus is the easiest way to do this. Guy signs his name, he gets $24 million because he signed his name, and boom, that doesn't go against the cap. He'll have a base roster salary of $7.5 million or whatever it is. The Philadelphia Eagles are the model on this. Not only have they just won the Super Bowl, but when you look at the Bengals' perspective, the Eagles have paid their quarterback, Jalen Hurts, and a lot of money. They've paid two-star wide receivers in Devontae Smith and A.J. Brown. They've paid Saquon Barkley a good chunk of money. They've paid their offensive line, including Lane Johnson. They've paid some players on their defense, although they're primarily young and cheap, but they went out and acquired Zach Bond in free agency. They've had Darius Slay for a while. Like, they have built this team by paying their stars, but they've done so by paying those stars money that is cash over cap, where there are more bonuses and less of a roster, a base salary that affects the cap hit. The Bengals historically like to keep the cap hit about the same, and they don't have any dead money. They never do that sort of thing. And this is why when we ask for them to change the way they structure contracts, when we ask for them to change the way they do things, this is what we're talking about. Historically, the Bengals don't like to guarantee money outside of year one. They will give you some money up front, but then, especially if you're an older player, think about Trey Hendrickson in this particular scenario, turning 31 in December. They're not going to guarantee you money down the line because they want to be able to protect themselves against the cap hit and injury and decline and so on. Whereas players want more guaranteed money, not just in year one, but for the entirety of their contract. That's the disconnect between the Bengals and the players. And that's where they need to get better. And the only player they've done this with is Joe Burrow, because they knew they had to. I think they're going to understand they have to do this with Jamar Chase as well. But it's also not just those players. It's anytime you bring in free agents. Think about the free agents the Bengals have acquired over the last several years. Von Bell, DJ Reader, Mike Hilton, guys like that are not elite top-level players. Alex Kappa is an example. Ted Karras is an example. Not elite top-level, best of the best players in the National Football League, but guys who will take that money in a short term so that they can get back to the open market and cash in. So they come to Cincinnati, think they can play well, get some money, and then get back out into the market. Perfect example of that is DJ Reader, what he was able to do. We've seen that happen. Mike Hilton is about to go do the same thing. So they have – even Trey Hendrickson was a guy who was trying to prove himself as being more than just a special teamer. Now he's trying to prove that I'm an all-pro player and I'm playing at a discount, basically. He came in, proved himself. The Bengals rewarded him with a bonus, and they bumped up his salary and so on, an extension, all that. And now he's at the second level of trying to prove that like he would out in the open market. So that's the type of stuff. When we talk about wanting the Bengals to change and evolve at the top, and when it comes to roster building and contract structure, more guaranteed money over the life of the contract and more cash over cap, so that it allows you flexibility to continue to build the rest of the roster. It shouldn't be where, hey, we're going to sign Higgins and Chase and Burrow and Mike Gesicki and Trey Hendrickson, but we don't have any money left over for everything else. Don't ever, 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 ever let an NFL owner cry poor to you. He's not. They aren't. They won't. They aren't. It's not true. They have the money. The Bengals have the money to be able to make this work. It's about a philosophical change in roster building. The other thing I think is interesting, with the salary cap continuing to go up, I wonder if we'll see more players sign short-term deals. Perfect example, A.J. Brown, wide receiver from Philadelphia. He gets to Philly in a trade from Tennessee, signs a 3-year, $92 million deal, something along those lines. Or maybe that was Devontae Smith. Either way, it was a 3-year deal, not a 4-year deal. Thought being, process being, idea being, I'll get to the open market again sooner, and the salary cap will continue to go up. I wonder if that's something that Jamar Chase is negotiating. I wonder if that's something that T. Higgins is negotiating. Hey, I've seen the salary cap go up $50 million over the last 2 years, and the wide receiver market has exploded a lot over the last couple of years. I'm going to try to do a shorter deal and get some guaranteed money and then hit the open market again and double dip. That is what you are trying to do if you're a player, and that is what you should be avoiding if you're a team. That's why the Bengals should have gotten the Higgins deal done 2 years ago. That's why the Bengals should have gotten the Jamar Chase deal done a year ago. Now they've cost themselves even more money. If you want to talk about the Bengals being cheap, okay, you can do that. You want to talk about the Bengals being poor, okay, you can do that. Well, their decisions in roster building have been so stupid and so wrong that they've ended up costing themselves a lot more money and made roster building a lot harder on themselves over the last couple of years because they refused to change the way they do contracts. That's bad business. You've got to be one step ahead of everybody else. That's going to do it for this episode of the Ball Don't Lie podcast. I hope you learned something, and maybe you'll try NASCAR this week. I don't know. Maybe you'll try Netflix. Let me know if you watch any of those things. You can tweet at me at Auty Elmore, AUTYELMORE. I'm on all social media with that handle, Auty Elmore. Listen to me weekdays, 12 to 3 on ESPN 1530 in Cincinnati. Download the iHeartRadio app. I co-host a show there called Cincy 360 with Tony Pike. You can also hear me on the weekends on 700 WLW. Excited to say that I will be back for extra innings on Sunday afternoons this year following Reds baseball on the big one. Looking forward to that. Thank you so much for listening. And as always, have fun, be safe, go Bucks.